So you flesh out your story idea and you've suddenly realized that your story is lacking conflict. If this is something you can relate to, then this video is for you. When you first flesh out a story idea, it's actually perfectly normal to discover that your story is lacking conflict. Quite often when you create a story, you create the entire story in layers. Like you'll sort of flesh out the story idea, then you'll outline, and then you'll revise your outline, and you'll go through and you'll add more conflict into the story. This is actually perfectly normal, so don't think that if your story idea is sort of lacking conflict straight from the word go, then it's actually a bad idea. It isn't. It's just you need to add more conflict into your story. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 types of conflict that are possible within a story. So let's get started. So why is conflict so important? Basically, it comes down to no one wants to read a story about a character going through the motions and living an ordinary life. That's simply boring. When you consider how you live your own life, you will find that if you sort of reflect, it's these moments of conflict in your life that encourage you to take action and move to the next step, or whatever that may be. And the same should be true of your characters. When you think of how nothing ever seems to go as planned, maybe that's a bit extreme. Very rarely things go as you sort of expect in life. Usually your plans have unexpected outcomes, the people around you have different motivations, and often these motivations can be in conflict with what you really want. And there are a whole heap of other things in life that are just outside of your control, and all of these things are essentially conflict or obstacles that get in your way. Basically, a story is about a character going through life, minus all the boring bits, and triumphing over all of these conflicts and obstacles that get in the way of what they really want in life. So that's why conflict is so important. It makes a story fascinating. It's what causes your reader to turn the page and get to that last page to figure out whether your character actually gets what they want. It's what motivates the reader to read. There are 5 types of conflict that you could possibly incorporate into your story. These types of conflicts tend to fall into 2 categories: internal conflict and external conflict. So with internal conflict, you generally have man versus himself or herself. And basically, it's the internal struggle that we all can relate to. It's this internal struggle that makes your characters relatable. No matter if you're writing literary fiction or some type of genre fiction, you still need to have an element of this internal struggle. This is what makes your characters real. Whether they're younger and they're sort of really figuring out who they are, or they're not comfortable with who they are, they want to be something else, but really they're this, and it's that struggle of self-acceptance. Or it's the realization that you sometimes do stuff that you're not proud of, and it's that struggle of, am I a terrible person? Or does this make me a bad person? And it's this internal struggle that makes your characters relatable. So that is man versus self. Essentially, this is the biggest internal struggle that you can have. Another example of internal struggle would be that you're working with somebody and they just drive you up the wall, and you might really struggle to really sort of like and sort of really accept this person. So that could be another example of internal struggle. So with external struggle, you got the most obvious ones where it's man versus government and society. You see stuff like this in like the Divergent series, the Hunger Games, where it's these teenagers versus this corrupt government, organization, company. Sometimes it's religious groups, like in the Da Vinci Code, it's obviously, wow, forgot his name, but the main character versus the Catholic Church with Da Vinci Code. They're sort of concealing the truth. Yeah, so that's man versus government. The next level is obviously man versus man, and that's those relationships you have with other people, and there's sort of some type of friction or conflict. That person drives you up the wall. This is the element of that's that's external, that everyone can see, how you visibly can't hide the fact that you just don't like this person or this person drives you nuts. This is something that's quite prevalent in romance books, where guy meets girl, girl thinks he's the most irritating person on the planet, and that's an example of man versus man. And obviously the most important example of man versus man is your protagonist versus an antagonist, especially if they're both people. That's the ultimate example. Your protagonist wants to do something else, your antagonist wants to do this for, you know, these reasons, and it's direct opposite to what your protagonist wants. So they have this major clash in your novel. This is an example of man versus man. Then you have man versus the supernatural. In books, like, I do read a lot of religious thrillers as well. An example of this would be J.F. Penn's Arcane series. You've got Morgan and Jake versus some creepy person who's out to do, actually it's not person, it's some person does this because they want to fulfill this type of prophecy, and in the process of fulfilling this particular prophecy, they unleash this supernatural being. So then it becomes Jake and Morgan in this particular series versus this weird supernatural thing, and they've got to sort of overcome this and return the world back to its normal place. And the last one is man versus nature. So with man versus nature, it can be sort of like a scientist versus an exploding volcano. Or do you remember the movie Day After Tomorrow? It was Jake Gyllenhaal and Emmy Rossum and a whole heap of scientists versus the ocean current dropping in temperature, which sort of led to an ice age. So that was man. So that's man versus nature. And obviously you got the example of Dante's Peak that I spoke about in a couple of other videos ago, where I was talking about how it was like a scientist versus Dante's Peak, which is a volcano that this particular city was named after. So the scientist realizes that there's movement in this volcano and no one listens to them naturally. So the volcano explodes and it becomes, you know, this race for survival. It's sort of like in these man versus nature type of conflicts, it's almost like Mother Nature's getting its revenge almost, and a race for survival. Are you struggling to create conflict in your story? Let me know by sharing your thoughts and experiences with creating conflict in your story in the comments section below. If you found this video useful, then give it a thumbs up. If you're new to this channel, then click the red subscribe button to get notified for more videos just like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.